Hello, guys and girls. Board now back with you, and this is going to be a review of a recent movie which was just released last Friday on Amazon Prime. If you're in the UK, I think it sort of varies. The rest of the world, you might have to rent it, but this is one that's getting quite a bit of awards attention. Got a number of nominations, I think, at both the Golden Globes and the Oscars, and it's called Mauritanian, and it's the true life story about Mohamedou Alid Salah, who was basically imprisoned and detained at Guantanamo Bay in total for 14 years, despite obviously at one point getting his appeal heard and basically accepted, and he was supposed to be released at that point, but was still detained for another 7 years, I think. So it's based on his novel, not novel, but book of his experiences at his time there. And yeah, it's basically the story about how he was detained there with very little evidence that he was actually involved, and about some of the practices and the way he was treated there, and about the whole case to try and get him out, which involves a couple of human rights lawyers who fight for his case. And it gets into the whole culture, so it's obviously based on true experiences. And it's directed by Kevin MacDonald, who has a background in documentary films, British director, so I think his documentary past will come in handy when you see some of this film. And he, in the past, has directed such films as the documentary Touching the Void, which was a very intense visual experience, I can tell you that, and also a feature film, but again based on true events and a true character, which was The Last King of Scotland, which of course won Forest Whitaker a deserved Oscar back in 2006 now. So just a couple of his films from the past, but he has been involved in quite a few other documentaries. Marley, for example, about Bob Marley. So he's the director, and I think that style definitely comes into play. And Mohamedou in this film is played by Tahim Rahim, who actually recently played another real life character, but a very different one, and that was in the BBC drama The Serpent, about the notorious killer. So he returns for this, has a bit of a knack of transforming himself, but actually when you see the real life Mohamedou, he does bear quite a striking similarity to him. Also, he was in the French prison film A Prophet quite a few years ago. And also supporting him, Jodie Foster, who makes a comeback to film. She's kind of in semi-retirement this year, but she's back, which I think tells you that it must have been a role that she felt strongly about. She plays the human rights lawyer taking on the case, and alongside her you have Shelley Woodley, who popped up in a bunch of things. She plays like the assistant lawyer who works um, with Jodie Foster's lawyer, whose name I've forgotten the name actually now, but I'll plough on anyway. So they work together on the case, and the Shirley Woodley character is basically a more inexperienced lawyer. She's like I think she might be an intern, but she's certainly new to the firm. And she's working a different case at the time, but Foster's character is like, no, I want you on this, basically. And I think that's partly a strategy, because I think she maybe figures a younger sort of girl, or has, and this is cynical, but I just got the impression that might be the way, it could be something where, Mohamedou might sort of open up to her a bit more than, Foster, her character, who he might see more as part of the establishment, part of a typical lawyer type thing. and they investigate the case together. You get a bunch of scenes where they have to go to like this file room, and you have the whole thing about things being redacted, so you got this ridiculous just blackness all over the pages, all over the words, so hardly any of it is like open for them to see. So that makes it very hard. So what they do is they get Mohamedou to write letters, and they use that to try and, you know, get the evidence and get his testimony of what happened. Also, Benedict Cumberbatch appears here. He appears as like the attorney for the other side. So basically, there's a lot of pressure on him to prosecute the case. And for a long time in the film, because the facts from his point of view do seem to point to Mohamedou being just guilty of the charge, which is that he organised 9/11, and this film crucially is set a couple of months after 9/11. But over the course of the film, the Cumberbatch character does change. So let's get into the film, and I have to say I might watch this again, but on the first viewing this was disappointing to me. It never really got going, it never really grabbed me dramatically. Obviously certain scenes did, but generally it was a bit of a struggle. I felt scenes of it were quite jarring, and I feel like they weren't finding the best way to put the film together and really engross me in it. So I mentioned MacDonald's documentary background, and I think he does try to sort of insert that into this, and I'm not quite sure it ever got the right balance. So we get the setup scene with Mohamedou and him at home, and I will say there's actually no subtitles during those scenes, and you get later scenes of him in Guantanamo Bay where he's actually talking to this other prisoner who he strikes up a bond with, and those scenes have no subtitles. I think I can see why they don't. I think they're going for like the message of his language sort of being ignored kind of thing, and his voice not being heard, that sort of thing. But I guess it could still be a bit frustrating, the fact that it's sort of, some of this would be important stuff, but I can see why they made that choice. But no, I mean, after the initial sort of setup, you have a lot of flashbacking back and forth. You have like scenes of Mohamedou in his past at home, and you have, because basically he came across one of the key figures in 9/11. You know, the guy basically visited his home, and that's almost the biggest evidence the state have against him, the fact that he happens to have been in the same room as this guy. But in any case, we get those flashback scenes. Because at one point we see him playing football, like at Guantanamo, and that's a nice little scene, him like kicking the ball back and forth with this other prisoner. But the flashback scenes, because they look very different from the present scenes, then I did find that very jarring. They do have a very sort of kind of, I don't know how to describe it, just very trippy kind of effect in it, quite hypnotic, quite sort of dreamy, and a bit more amateurish, you know, going for the more documentary style feel. And it just took me out of the film, and some of the flashbacks I didn't quite feel that we needed. And I think this is an example where this film maybe could have worked better as a documentary. It could have suited the story, and because when you're jumping about time structures like this, I think a documentary is more suited. I think a documentary can work better for that. So that's problem one, and they were sort of doing this throughout the film. Whereas for me, the meaty stuff and the interesting stuff was with the case. So when it was with the case and with the Foster character and the lawyers and obviously their interactions with Mohamedou, I was sort of with that, and that's when I was getting into it. And but other times when it kept jumping back and forth, it just lost the flow of the film, and that's what I thought the film lacked, was real flow, real momentum. There's also these strange scenes later on in the film where he's being interviewed and where basically the whole torture aspect starts coming in, because initially he's interviewed by a couple of guys who, like, they're not terrible to him. They're kind of, obviously they're trying to get the information, and I think you feel that maybe they don't believe him, but they're fair to him. They sort of treat him quite well. And I think it's just this ironic sort of beat where they're kind of like bringing him cakes and that, and maybe trying to like be more subtle with him, whereas then you get the really heavy stuff and the torture. And but at one point they do have like this dream sequence, and this is during him being tortured, of like him just imagining those guys in the room. And then you have all this stuff. I should have said full spoilers, but you have all this stuff with the soldiers coming in with, they're wearing masks, and like you've got a female one, and she's kind of like, oh fuck me sort of thing, and she's in a mask and stripping down, getting all seductive, and then you get like one of the guys in like a clown mask, and it's like, what's going on? I mean, this is starting to feel like a David Lynch film sort of mixed in here. And here's the thing, now this is obviously based on his book, the real character's book, so maybe this is accurate to some of his experiences, but the problem is it just doesn't work within the film. It doesn't work as a drama in this film. It sort of took me out of it and just made those scenes a bit cartoonish and a little bit silly and just distracting, because they didn't really feel like other parts of the film. The best parts, as I said, were the stuff with the lawyers and their interactions with Mahamadou. I think this is perfect casting for Foster, because her whole thing, her lawyer character, is that she's very tough, very grounded, very cynical, but she's very fair. It's like she feels like a real lawyer, where she doesn't go in necessarily believing Mahamadou, which I think you might assume such a lawyer would, but she goes in with, she literally just wants to know the facts. And she's very fair but very tough throughout, and I think you get the impression she's quite sort of cynical with the system and the world. And she has some like funny lines, like when they see the files being all redacted, it's like, yeah, hey, did the Pentagon printer went on the blink or something? And she just feels like a real character who's very passionate, but also very down the line, and not. But she also feels like a renegade, like a rebel almost against the system, which is a good sort of role for Foster. It almost feels like, yeah, she's this is quite true to Foster in real life. Because I will say this film like takes pot shots also at the Obama administration, because it was them who ultimately didn't let him out straight away. Even it took them 7 years, even though yeah, obviously the court had overturned it. But anyway, that's the politics. Shirley Woodley's very good as well. I think she's always a solid actress. Yeah, solid support from her. So I think the one sort of cast member, because I think also Tahem Rarin, I wasn't sure at first. He seemed a little bit twitchy, but I think he does grow on you, and I think this character Mahamadou, this real life person, is very inspirational, and he did seemingly put a brave face on a traumatic experience. And so I think Rahim's very good at being this charismatic, playful sort of figure who a very good dramatic actor, but I think he does have real presence, and he brings out that personality, which apparently was quite true to life. I've heard Jodie Foster talk about this in an interview. So yeah, at first I wasn't sure about the casting, but it did make, and he was very good in it. So I think the weak link from the cast is the Cumberbatch character. He just seems this very one note, typical macho American who does change over the course of the film. And he's obviously put in a very good spot. Sorry, very bad spot, because basically it gets into the politics of how his superiors just want the case to be prosecuted. It's like they're under pressure from the government just to tie the crimes to someone without, actually looking for the right person. So he's in a bad spot, but Cumberbatch I thought was just very wooden in this. I think he's miscast, and it doesn't really help that a lot of his interactions with other characters are very typical. They almost feel quite soapy at times, but it's done in very basic broad strokes where it is this very stereotypical macho view of Americans, and there's just not a lot of meat to it. Now, obviously, again, that might be quite accurate, and it probably does sum up a certain attitude from certain, figures in the army. But again, I think you have to separate what makes for good drama with what was reality. And I think for the sake of the film, it needs to be a bit more dramatic. It needs to be a bit more engaging. And those scenes were just very bland to me. They just felt like a soap opera at times, and I think because we were jumping around those scenes and then the lawyer scenes, and then we had flashback, it just made for a very uneven film, in my opinion, that never really got into its groove. There's some good moments of satire, like, I mean, it's revealed at one point where there's a good scene between Foster and the Cumberbatch attorney where they meet up at one point. They're at Guantanamo Bay at the same time, and they discuss it, and it's a nice, sincere conversation, and it's a nice, they sort of have respect for each other, and but they're in a gift shop. Basically, there's a gift shop at Guantanamo Bay, and she just points it to him. How could I not think this is ridiculous? Basically, we're at a gift shop. So touches like that, which I totally believe is real. Then they had a gift shop there. Touches like that really peel back the layers and reveal what a ridiculous place Guantanamo Bay probably is. I'm not sure if it's still there or not, but it's, well, yeah. So I think from that point of view, I'm glad the film got made, and it's an important story to tell. I just think it's a bit on the nose sometimes with its politics, could have been a bit more subtle. And yeah, overall it wasn't as dramatic and engaging as I wanted, and it ended up feeling a bit bland, which is disappointing. Obviously, strong performances, bar Cumberbatch, but yeah, not the film I was hoping. So I'm gonna give this a 5.5 out of 10. So disappointing. It's on Amazon Prime if you're in the UK. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you've seen it. If you disagree with me, then please let me know. And yeah, let me know your thoughts on Mauritanian. You can also support the channel, like and subscribe, all that stuff, for more of these sorts of reviews. I might actually do some of the Oscar nominated films as we get it. Well, we're into Oscar season now. No promises, I might catch up. But also you can look forward to some horror movie reviews coming up, because it's been a while since I've done one of those. But thanks for listening, and goodbye.